Hi everyone, it's Neve here and welcome to my art journaling channel. Today we're going to be making your very own mixed media junk journal. So with this I'm using up lots and lots of pages I've had sitting around in my stash for such a long time. And I'm just doing a quick flick through of the signatures I've got here. So there's collage papers, printed tissues, gel prints. There's some pages from a Dylusions creative diary that I don't use anymore that have been cut up and put in, which I actually really love because they're thicker cardboard. And I'd really suggest to you, when you're making your own junk journal, chuck in some thicker pages or some cardboard pages, because that gives you the opportunity to do some lace cut pages and so on later on in your journal. So I'm just using my Crop-A-Dile hole punch to punch in the holes, which you might think is a bit of overkill for the size of the hole. I'm actually using the smaller, I think it's a 1/4 inch, probably less than that, hole punch. But it just means that you can put your needle and thread through really, really easily. It's not going to get stuck. In the past, I've used an awl to poke through the holes, but with that Crop-A-Dile, it's fantastic because I can actually just punch all the holes at once and it's easy to hold everything together. Once you've got your signatures together, then I like to actually measure to make my front cover of my book, because it just depends on how big my signatures are, what width and height they are. So I just take it as it comes. I was trying to get everything sort of an A5 size, so the largest pages would be an A4 size folded in half, but some of the pages were slightly larger. So basically when you're cutting it, you have your signature, lay it out in your piece of paper, and you want to have about 1/2 centimetre to 1 centimetre, or about 1/2 inch around each 3 sides. Sorry, you don't need it on the very far side. So you've got enough room that you're not going to have overhang coming out. Then you're going to need to cut your spine, which is the piece I've cut there, and my spine was about 2 inches thick. And in all honesty, it's probably a bit thick for this junk journal that I made, but it means it's going to expand pretty easily. So I'm just using my holes that I've already punched and using that as a guide on my spine. Now again, with this, I've just punched one row of holes and I've got 2 signatures, which means both signatures are going to be bound into the same holes. I've since taught junk journaling class. This is actually my class sample that I was making, and when I made this I realized I actually needed to punch as many holes as I did for the signatures. So I would actually put in 2 rows of holes if I did 2 signatures, 3 rows of holes if I did 3 signatures, and obviously make my spine as wide as it needed to be to correspond to that. It just means everything's not going to be as tightly packed in as you go. With putting the book covers together, you can see I've left about 1/2 centimetre, which is about a 1/4 of an inch gap in between. That's really important because that gap helps you bend the book. That acts as your hinge in your book. So if you don't leave that gap, your book is not going to close very well. I'm using some of the wonderful Little Raven ink printable collage pages that she puts out. I just love her style, her aesthetic, her color combination is just amazing. I've got lots and lots of her printables, and pages like this I don't tend to use because I actually love the entire page as is. So being able to use it as a front of a book cover is fantastic. So you see me just covering the outside pages, and the reason I'm covering it before I bind anything in is because if I bind it, I'm going to then have to work out how I'm going to cover it. I'm also covering the inside of my book at the same time. So these are printables that I got as part of Wellspring, I think, or the Lifebook pre-show that they had from Tony Burt, and I absolutely adored them. They're just such simple, I say such simple, there's no way I could do them, sketches, but they're just beautiful. And again, they're probably not something I'm going to use in my journaling anywhere, but I still love them. So being able to have them in my junk journal as pieces of art that I can really appreciate and admire when I'm going into my junk journal is something really that I love. Same reason I like to cover my own journals with the Little Raven ink papers, because I just love her style of mic making. So having it on front cover sort of reminds me why I really love it. So when you're bookbinding, it is really good to use waxed thread. Now, I didn't have any waxed thread, but my brother-in-law is a beekeeper and sent me down this lovely block of beeswax to use for encaustic art. So I thought, well, I've got embroidery thread, can I wax it? And it worked. So if you don't have access to waxed thread, you can get it from bookbinding places. Your art shop should be able to get it. You might be able to get it in Spotlight. If you've got embroidery thread and a candle or some beeswax, you can run it through and it'll work the same. Basically, by waxing it, what it does is means your thread isn't going to unravel and it can tie a tighter knot. So it just holds everything nice and secure. You can see I've got quite a lot of thread. I really didn't know how much it was going to take to bind both signatures together, so I was being quite generous. And I'm starting off in my very top hole. Now, this is a simple saddle stitch. I've since learned some sewing terminology. Can't work out the word. So basically what it is just going in and out through the holes all the way down and then coming back through. So every hole has got a double stitch through it. It just means it's a really, really secure stitch. Sometimes if you look up on YouTube, you'll see this probably slowed down a little bit. You can sometimes see it called a saddle stitch or a pamphlet stitch. But for me, who is definitely a non-sewer, it's really, really simple to do. So you can just see me working my way backwards and forwards. You can see there by having the wax thread, it just helps it not get knotty as well. So it's really hard to keep this in shot because obviously you're having to move it all the time. By having those larger holes though, you can see I'm not struggling to get my needle through, which is a real bonus. Obviously it's, you could sort of say it takes away from your artwork, but really you're only going to see it in the middle page, and even then, because you've got going to stitch up and back through it, you don't really notice it in the long run. So you can see me coming back up through. I'm getting a bit faster now. Lifting your book up really does actually help to keep everything in place. The first few stitches are a little bit harder to do because you're trying to hold all your pages together, and you will notice in my journal that I've got differing pages. Now this is one thing that I found really helped me. I've got a skewer that I've just put through the middle pages just to act as a bit of a balance and hold everything together while I'm trying to sew. And the main reason for that is you can see one of the first pages in my signature is actually a half page. It goes down halfway through and I'm starting at the top, so by the time I got down to that piece it would have moved and shifted and been a pain. So having all my pages rest on a skewer really helped keep it all together until I got everything secure. Because I'm binding two of the signatures through the same hole, it's starting to get a little bit tighter because obviously I've got everything sitting up nice and close together. It's still doable, there's still enough room in there, and because my spine is quite thick, it's going to give enough room for expansion. So you certainly can do this, but I would probably suggest for every signature you have that you make a new set of row of holes that you can bind through. The other thing I forgot to say was, if you would like to have a ribbon or something to tie your book shut, you need to glue that down in place before you put the end papers in and before you bind your book. It's something I always forget to do. If you actually have your ribbon going the whole way through your book, it's going to really help out in the long run. So that was just a quick flip through of the book so you could see how it all works together. Now I'm just sort of playing around with the front cover. Again, this is a printable from Courtney Diaz. I will leave the link in the description box below for her Patreon site, where you can go and find out how to get her printables and so on, and check out her Instagram site too. She's just got some beautiful artwork, and as I've said before on this channel, something about her artwork just really appeals to my psyche. Her little creatures sort of just echo what I'm thinking or feeling, so I just feel a real kinship with them. I'm just finishing off with some little quotes from Tim Holtz, which said, "Life doesn't have to be perfect to be wonderful, never give up," which I really love about this junk journal. Now, the one thing I forgot to say about this is why a junk journal, particularly with all these messy pages in it. And the reason I do it is because I'm not precious about it. They've already got paint and ink and yuck and, well, I think actually lovely grungy stuff over it. So I don't feel precious about it. I can jump into this and do something really quickly without fearing that white page. I also use my junk journals as my travel journal because it's light and easy to transport, and again because it's already got those pages in the background sort of complete. I only have to add a little bit, like a quote over the top, to have a finished page, so it works really well for me. So I hope you have a go at making your own junk journal. It is really simple to do. There are lots and lots of other tutorials on YouTube, so please check those out as well. This is just a really quick sort of recap of what it looks like, but I would highly recommend that you make your own junk journal with all your pages. Until next time, bye for now.